What happens when a music legend faces off against the most controversial hosts on daytime television? You won't believe what unfolds when Cher steps into the lion's den of The View and finds herself under attack from Joy Behar and the panel in what can only be described as the most explosive confrontation in the show's history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of The View was supposed to be a celebration of Cher's legendary career, but instead, it turned into a battlefield that left viewers stunned and the music icon storming off the set in disgust. What started as seemingly innocent questions quickly devolved into a coordinated attack that exposed the true nature of these hosts and their willingness to ambush even the most beloved celebrities. The tension was palpable from the moment Cher walked onto the set. While the audience erupted in applause for the Oscar-winning actress and Grammy-winning singer, there was something different in the air. Joy Behar's smile seemed forced, almost predatory, as she prepared to welcome her guest. Whoopi Goldberg sat stone-faced, her usual warmth nowhere to be found. Sunny Hostin shuffled through her notes with an intensity that suggested this wasn't going to be the typical softball interview fans expected. "Welcome back to The View. We're here with the incomparable Cher," Joy began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Now, Cher, you've been very vocal about politics lately, and I have to ask, don't you think celebrities should stick to entertaining rather than lecturing the American people?" The question hit like a slap across the face. Cher's expression shifted immediately, her famous smile fading as she processed what had just been thrown at her. This wasn't the friendly chat she'd been promised by the producers. This was an ambush, and everyone in the studio could feel it. "Excuse me?" Cher responded, her voice carrying that unmistakable edge that had made her a survivor in Hollywood for over 5 decades. "I'm sorry, Joy, but I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm an American citizen, and I have every right to express my opinions about the direction of this country." Joy's laugh was sharp and condescending. "Oh, come on, Cher. You're telling me that someone who spent their entire life in the Hollywood bubble really understands what's happening in Middle America? Don't you think it's a bit arrogant to assume your opinion carries more weight than the average working person?" The studio audience began to murmur uncomfortably. This wasn't the light-hearted celebrity interview they'd come to see. Whoopi jumped in, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Look, Cher, we appreciate your passion, but Joy has a point. When celebrities get political, it often comes across as out of touch. You live in a mansion in Malibu. How can you possibly relate to someone struggling to pay rent in Ohio?" Cher's eyes flashed with anger. She'd faced down industry executives, survived divorce battles, and conquered every entertainment medium imaginable, but nothing had prepared her for this level of disrespect. "Are you kidding me right now? I grew up poor, Whoopi. I know what it's like to struggle. And just because I've been successful doesn't mean I've forgotten where I came from or that I don't care about other people." But the hosts weren't backing down. Sunny Hostin leaned forward, her voice taking on a prosecutorial tone. "But Cher, you have to admit that when you post on social media about political issues, you're using your platform to influence people who might not have access to the same information you do. Isn't that a form of manipulation?" The word manipulation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Cher's face went pale with fury. "Manipulation? Are you seriously accusing me of manipulating people because I care about human rights and democracy? What exactly are you trying to say here?" Joy seized the moment, her voice rising with fake indignation. "We're saying that maybe, just maybe, you should consider that your massive platform comes with responsibility. When you tweet something to your millions of followers, you're not having a conversation with friends. You're broadcasting to impressionable people who might take your word as gospel." The audience was now completely silent, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. This wasn't the fun, celebrity-focused content they'd expected. Instead, they were witnessing what felt like a calculated character assassination of one of America's most beloved entertainers. Cher sat back in her chair, her hands gripping the armrests as she tried to maintain her composure. "I can't believe what I'm hearing right now. You invited me here under false pretenses." I thought we were going to talk about my career, my music, maybe my upcoming projects. Instead, you're attacking my character and my right to speak as an American citizen. Nobody's attacking you, Cher, Whoopi said with false calm. We're just asking you to consider the impact of your words. Is that really so unreasonable? But Cher wasn't buying it. She could see through their coordinated effort to paint her as some out-of-touch celebrity who had overstepped her bounds. This is exactly what's wrong with this show, she said, her voice beginning to rise. You pretend to be having honest conversations, but really you're just trying to tear people down. You're not journalists. You're bullies. Joy's mask finally slipped completely. Bullies? Really, Cher? Because we're asking you tough questions? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle being challenged, so you resort to name-calling. The confrontation was escalating rapidly, and something told everyone in that studio that they were about to witness something unprecedented. The hosts had clearly underestimated who they were dealing with, and Cher was about to show them exactly what happened when you backed a legend into a corner. Cher's eyes narrowed as she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow commanded more attention than shouting ever could. You know what, Joy? You want to talk about responsibility? Let's talk about the responsibility you have as a host to treat your guests with basic respect, instead of setting them up for ambush interviews. The studio fell dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath as they sensed the shift in power dynamics. This wasn't the intimidated celebrity the hosts had expected to steamroll. This was Cher, in full battle mode, and decades of surviving Hollywood's worst had prepared her for exactly this moment. Joy's face flushed red as she realized her calculated attack was backfiring spectacularly. Now, hold on just a minute, Cher. We're not ambushing anyone. We're doing our jobs as talk show hosts by asking relevant questions about current events. Relevant questions? Cher's voice rose, her famous rasp cutting through the studio like a blade. You mean like questioning my right to have political opinions? Or suggesting that success somehow disqualifies me from caring about other people? That's not journalism, Joy. That's character assassination, and you know it. Whoopi tried to regain control, her voice taking on that condescending tone she reserved for guests who dared to fight back. Cher, I think you're being overly sensitive here. We're just trying to have a conversation about celebrity influence in politics. It's a legitimate topic. But Cher wasn't having any of it. She turned to face Whoopi directly, her posture radiating the kind of confidence that could only come from someone who'd survived every challenge the entertainment industry could throw at her. Overly sensitive? Really, Whoopi? You're going to gaslight me on national television and then tell me I'm being too sensitive about it? The word gaslight hit the panel like a thunderbolt. They clearly hadn't expected their guest to call out their tactics so directly. Sunny Hostin jumped in, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. That's a very serious accusation, Cher. We're not gaslighting anyone. We're simply pointing out that celebrity political activism can be problematic. Problematic? Cher's laugh was bitter and sharp. What's problematic is sitting here pretending this is some intellectual debate, when what you're really doing is trying to shame me for using my voice. You want to know what's really problematic? Having a platform like this show and using it to bully your guests instead of having honest conversations. The audience was now completely riveted. What had started as an uncomfortable interview had transformed into something far more explosive. These weren't just heated words being exchanged. This was a full-scale war between a beloved icon and the hosts who had clearly bitten off more than they could chew. Joy's composure was cracking completely now. You know what, Cher? Maybe the problem is that you can't handle being questioned. Maybe you're so used to people kissing your ring that you can't deal with anyone who doesn't automatically agree with everything you say. The insult landed like a physical blow. Cher's face went white with rage, and for a moment, everyone in the studio thought she might actually get up and leave right then and there. But instead, she did something far more devastating. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that had preceded some of the most legendary takedowns in Hollywood history. Kiss my ring? Cher's voice was dangerously quiet. Joy, honey, I've been dealing with critics and haters since before you even had a career. I've survived music executives who tried to control me, movie studios that said I couldn't act, and ex-husbands who thought they owned me. You think a failed comedian turned talk show host is going to intimidate me? The studio erupted in gasps. Cher had just delivered one of the most brutal verbal smackdowns in daytime television history, and everyone knew it. Joy's face went from red to purple as she struggled to formulate a response to the devastating personal attack. "How dare you?" Joy sputtered, her voice shaking with fury. "How dare you come on our show and insult me personally?" This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle criticism, so you resort to personal attacks. But Cher wasn't finished. She was just getting started. Personal attacks? You mean like questioning my intelligence, my integrity, and my right to have opinions? Like suggesting I'm manipulating people and living in a bubble? You started this, Joy. Don't act shocked when someone fights back. Whoopi was desperately trying to regain control of the situation, but it was clear the show had spiraled completely out of her hands. "Okay, everyone, let's take a step back here. This is getting way too heated." Too heated? Cher turned on Whoopi with the fury of someone who'd finally had enough. "You're damn right it's heated. You invited me here under false pretenses, ambushed me with hostile questions, and now you want to tone police me when I defend myself? This is exactly the kind of fake, manipulative garbage that makes people hate the media." The tension in the studio was now so thick you could cut it with a knife. Crew members were looking at each other nervously, unsure whether to keep filming or cut to commercial. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing what was clearly becoming one of the most infamous moments in television history. Sonny made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Cher, I think we've gotten off track here. Maybe we should focus on your music career instead of politics." Cher's response was swift and merciless. "Focus on my music? Now you want to talk about my music? After you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to destroy my reputation? It's a little late for that, don't you think, Sonny?" The confrontation had reached a boiling point, and everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. The hosts had pushed too far, and Cher was about to show them exactly what happened when you underestimated a true legend. Cher stood up from her chair with the grace and authority of someone who had commanded stages around the world for 5 decades. The simple action sent shockwaves through the studio, as everyone realized this wasn't just another heated exchange. This was about to become television history. "You know what?" Cher's voice cut through the tension like a sword. "I've sat here and listened to enough of this garbage. You want to know what's really wrong with this show? It's not that you ask tough questions. It's that you're not interested in honest answers. You're interested in gotcha moments and cheap shots." Joy tried to interrupt, but Cher raised her hand with such commanding presence that the host actually fell silent. "No, Joy. You've had your turn to talk. Now it's mine." The studio was dead silent, except for the hum of the cameras that were capturing every second of what was unfolding. Even the crew members had stopped what they were doing to watch, as one of entertainment's biggest legends prepared to unleash decades of pent-up frustration with the media. "I came here today because I thought we were going to have a real conversation," Cher continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I thought we were going to talk about my music, my career, maybe some of the causes I care about. Instead, you turned this into some kind of twisted trial, where I'm supposed to apologize for having opinions and caring about people." Whoopi made a desperate attempt to regain control. "Cher, please sit down. Let's try to have a civilized conversation here." Cher's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Civilized? You want to talk about civilized, Whoopi? There's nothing civilized about what you people just did to me. You ambushed me, attacked my character, and then when I defended myself, you acted like I was the problem." The audience was completely transfixed. This wasn't the typical celebrity meltdown they might have expected. This was a masterclass in how to handle bullies, and Cher was the professor. "And you know what the real tragedy is?" Cher continued, her voice taking on a tone of genuine sadness mixed with fury. "You have this incredible platform. You could be using it to have real conversations about important issues. Instead, You use it to tear people down and create cheap drama for ratings. Sunny Hostin made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Cher, I think you're misunderstanding our intentions here. We were just trying to explore the complexities of celebrity influence in politics. Cher turned to face Sunny directly, her eyes blazing with the kind of righteous anger that had fueled her through decades of fighting for what she believed in. Misunderstanding? Sunny, I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. I know exactly what you were trying to do, and so does everyone watching this train wreck. The hosts were now looking at each other with barely concealed panic. They had clearly expected to dominate this interview, to make headlines by taking down a beloved celebrity. Instead, they were being systematically destroyed by someone who knew exactly how to fight back. You want to know what real influence looks like? Cher's voice rose to fill the entire studio. It's not about telling people what to think. It's about using your voice to stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about speaking truth to power, even when that power is sitting right across from you on a talk show set. Joy was now visibly shaking with rage and humiliation. You can't just waltz in here and lecture us about how to do our jobs, Cher. We've been doing this for years. And look how well that's worked out for you. Cher shot back without missing a beat. Your ratings are falling, your credibility is shot, and now you're reduced to ambushing guests because you can't generate interest any other way. That's not journalism, Joy. That's desperation. The insult hit its mark perfectly. Joy's face went white, then red, then purple as she struggled to find words. But Cher wasn't finished with her devastating takedown. You know what the difference is between you and me, Cher continued, her voice dripping with contempt. When I perform, I give people something uplifting. I make them feel good about themselves. When you perform, you tear people down to make yourself feel better. That's not entertainment. That's pathology. The studio erupted in gasps and murmurs. Cher had just delivered one of the most brutal verbal beatdowns in television history, and everyone knew it. The hosts sat there stunned, completely unprepared for the level of verbal warfare they had unleashed. Whoopi made one final attempt to regain some semblance of control. Cher, I think emotions are running high here. Maybe we should take a break and come back to this. But Cher was already removing her microphone, her movements deliberate and final. There's not going to be a come back to this, Whoopi. I'm done. I'm done with this show. I'm done with this fake conversation. And I'm done pretending that what you people do here has any value whatsoever. The camera operators were frantically adjusting their angles to capture every moment of what was clearly becoming one of the most infamous exits in television history. Cher stood there, microphone in hand, looking like the warrior she had always been. Let me leave you with this, Cher said, her voice now calm but carrying the weight of absolute finality. The next time you decide to ambush a guest, make sure you pick someone who doesn't know how to fight back, because when you come for a legend, you better not miss. With that, Cher dropped her microphone on the table, with a satisfying thud that echoed through the stunned studio. The sound seemed to break the spell that had held everyone frozen in place. She turned and walked toward the exit with the same regal bearing that had made her a star, leaving behind a panel of hosts who looked like they had just been hit by a hurricane. The audience sat in complete silence, processing what they had just witnessed. Joy Behar looked like she might actually cry. Whoopi was staring at her hands. Sunny was shuffling papers aimlessly. They had all been thoroughly, completely, and publicly destroyed by someone who had proven why she was still standing after 50 years in the entertainment business. As Cher reached the studio door, she paused and looked back one final time. "And Joy?" she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the silent studio. "Next time you want to pick a fight with someone, make sure you're actually qualified to win it." The door closed behind her with a definitive click, leaving the hosts to sit in the wreckage of what had been the most explosive confrontation in The View's history. The cameras kept rolling, capturing their stunned faces and the deafening silence that followed. In less than 30 minutes, Cher had walked onto that set as a guest and walked out as a legend who had just reminded everyone why she was still one of the most formidable forces in entertainment. The episode would go down in television history as the day The View finally met their match, and lost spectacularly.